Welcome to Publishing Without Supervision. I am your host, Erica Conroy. And this week, X is unable to join us again due to more family obligations, but we will let him off the hook this time as well. Of course, we didn't schedule anything for last week either. We've just been a bit of a rough month for the pair of us, mostly for X. So send him hugs and kisses. Today is our news roundtable discussion. So we will discuss some of the news items that have popped up in the last month or so, and no doubt Zoe will give her very biased but well-informed opinion on each and every item. So without further ado, welcome back, Zoe York.
Thank you very much.
Shall we get straight down to business?
We shall. Yes, I have a sidekick, a sleeping sidekick tonight, but that's what happens when you're a mom and you do a podcast at bedtime. So,
Yep, and if you're not watching the video, you're also missing out on Zoe's awesome little ear hairy thing. She's got
oh
little
yeah, I've got my hair in buns. Yeah,
little fun buns.
they're called deadline buns.
Oh, do they like screw tighter or something when your deadline
Yeah,
is faster approaching?
it's because I haven't showered today. Let's be honest. I'm on the
Oh,
podcast and I'm a little writery, but that's okay.
yeah, I haven't had long hair in a while, so yeah, I haven't had to put my hair up if I haven't cleaned it. I just cut it off.
Yeah.
Right, we only have a few items for you guys this month because I found a lot of items a bit boring or not really relevant, but I'm sure we've missed something that is important. But this is what has caught our attention. So, back in February, author earnings rolled up their sleeves and basically went for the whole enchilada. Usually, they just release data on Amazon, but this time they have the top 5 English language countries, which strangely New Zealand is one of them, and the 15 largest ebook stores, the big four being Amazon, iBooks, Kobo, and Nook, and the rest are etc. We'll call them, and about 750,000 top-selling ebook titles in all genres and categories. Now, what do we think about the information that Data Guy has released this time?
Yeah. So your highlighted point that Kindle Unlimited has now outstripped Kindle Unlimited sales and borrows books, and how are you going to say this? They're Kindle Unlimited is selling more books than Nook is now, right? Like
Well,
that
not
just
necessarily selling the number of books, but they're paying out their authors more than what Barnes and Noble's Nook is paying all of their publishers
yeah,
at the moment.
that's mind-boggling. Yeah, that's big. That is I mean, really that speaks mostly to the ill health of Nook more than anything else. But it's concerning. And also as a publisher, as a tiny little fish in the giant big pond, um, I really don't like that Kindle Unlimited is that big. But that being said, you have to pay attention to that, because if you're looking at it as if it were a separate marketplace, if it were a separate retailer, I mean, it's not. It's inside another retailer, but still, it's hang on, honey. Then if I'm not participating in that, am I cutting myself out of something? And is there a way to participate in it without impacting on my desire to be wide with at least some of my, because some of the retailers like iBooks, for example, they pay attention if some of your books are in Kindle Unlimited and they don't like it. So how do you manage that? So that's really, when I look at the Data Guy report, that's where my thoughts immediately go is, oh God, again, it opens up that can of worms again. Should I be in Kindle Unlimited? If I am, how would I be in it, etc.
Yeah, and he even goes so far to say in the report that it's very much, should I be in it? Shouldn't I be in it? If you are in it, you're probably getting about, I don't know how much more money that you would be getting if you were wide, but because you're in the one location, you're not really visible to as many possible people. which I would say is probably more an outside of America kind of thing. So your market is really focused on America first, maybe a little bit of the UK.
Yeah.
But as more and more countries, country stores become part of Kindle Unlimited, that might grow. But I mean, for the example they've got, I said that New Zealand's included in this study. New Zealand doesn't have its own Amazon store, so their sales are part of the .com store. So we don't see any data about Amazon New Zealand. We only see that the main seller for Amazon, for New Zealand books is through iBooks, which makes sense because of all the people who have Macs or iPhones and use iTunes and all that kind of thing. They have ready access to it. And then the next main seller of ebooks for New Zealand is Kobo, but they're only selling about half as many as what iBooks are selling.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, I just mean, which is interesting, full stop.
So iBooks has, in theory, right? They have the advantage of iBooks being on devices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Devices that people are picking up for reasons other than reading ebooks.
Mm-hmm.
Kobo is only selling to readers, right?
Mm-hmm.
What Amazon has done so spectacularly well that iBooks is only now trying to get on top of is Amazon has, for a number of years now, actively been selling ebooks to non-readers. And that's what KU is all about. If you look at the books that are doing the best in KU, how does Zoe say this politely? They could be described in large part as being books written for non-readers, right?
Well, maybe more of a casual reader, shall we say? A burgeoning on casual reader.
That would be very polite. They're the average, particularly in romance, and hey, I'll just throw my own genre out there. Particularly in romance, the reading grade level of KU books is like grade 1. And compare that to the reading grade level of the average book that's only for sale and not for borrow, and the discrepancy is huge. We're talking about books for people who want to consume specific content really quickly, sometimes 5 books a night, versus somebody who wants to savor a novel, right, and read it over a couple of days. When you look at that consumption, and you look at, particularly, it's in the US where they've pushed Kindles, and we've talked about this before, right? The buy 5 get 1 free Kindle, like, so, and also like the Kindle Fires, right? They've got like apps and stuff on them. They're being pushed as a tablet, but on them are ads. Amazon's gotten so slick at this. So you buy the Kindle because it's a crazy good Christmas present, and then on it are ads for books over and over and over and over again. That's super smart. So iBooks is doing this now too. I mean, when like iPhone's been out for how many years? 10 years? A long time. A number of years. And it was only a couple of years ago that they started shipping them with the iBooks app on it. They had this opportunity to put books in front of people from the very get-go, and they didn't. They put music in front of people from the very get-go, and iTunes is now how most people buy their music. But they did not do the same thing with books, and so now they're playing catch up on that regard. Whereas Kobo and Nook are only for people who go and seek it out, only for people who are readers to begin with. That being said, if you are an author who writes books for readers, I'm going to get so much hate mail about this. If you are an author who writes books for readers, then Kobo and not so much Nook. I mean, let's be honest, Nook. But Kobo is your marketplace still, right? On Kobo, you are not competing with people who are writing at a grade 1 level for fast consumption. At least not yet. I mean, did we talk about Kobo Plus last time? I was not a fan.
We did. That was their version of Kindle Unlimited, was it not?
Yeah.
That
Yeah, and I
they
was
took.
unimpressed then, and I remain unimpressed now. So anyway, so yeah, I think but iBooks too. iBooks, they like a quality book, they push a quality book. So I'm a fan of iBooks. So did I
And
ramble
like,
enough?
no, that's fine. Rambling is all good. Someone pointed out a comment that sales for ebooks for indies went down on Amazon last year, but overall they actually went up by about 4% in 2016. The only discrepancy really was that between May and October, the Amazon indie sales dropped, and it wasn't just for the KU titles. For non-KU indie titles, it did as well. Now, you remember the whole page flip issue and the page reads and stuff not happening back then, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was something that was figured out in about September and October, but this is something that started way before then. So I thought it was interesting that Data Guy then posted this theory in the discussion on the passive voice, and I'll quote him word for word here so I don't get anything wrong. America likes suing. He says, I think what happened is that the indie share of Amazon sales was getting too ridiculous, closing in on the 50% of all Amazon purchases. So Amazon decided to pull some algorithmic merchandising levers behind the scenes in their nightly marketing emails, for instance, to start pushing traditionally published ebooks at customers more aggressively. But traditional publishers would probably say more fairly. Oh, and it's in quotes. So isn't that mean it's not true? I shouldn't bring Trump into this discussion, should I? Considering who I'm talking to. Now, what do you have to think about that theory? Do you think it's, we can't say for certain if it's accurate, but
Yeah. So, I mean, on one hand, traditional publishers they're losing the digital marketplace. And that is not ideal, right? Ideally, those are big businesses, and Amazon is in the business of working with their distributors to increase sales in general. Amazon doesn't want to replace New York publishers like completely with indie books. Like they want to expand all offerings. And I do think that they like to shift things around so that nobody like the key is that Amazon doesn't want any of their partners to have any power. Like they just want everybody to understand that like at any time you should be petrified that your world's going to implode. And we all are petrified, so that they're doing a good job there.
I believe I saw a headline just recently saying that you can get insurance now for if Amazon cancels your seller account.
Oh, really?
I'll have to go looking for that, but I'm really certain I saw that headline just in the past week or so.
That speaks to how large an economy Amazon is in and of itself, doesn't it? That's kind of crazy. I think I have not seen any evidence, again, in my genre, which is the only one I pay attention to. I haven't seen any evidence that New York books are being unfairly promoted within my genre. It is still very, very, very hard for a New York published book to get any visibility, just like it is hard for like all books to get visibility unless there is huge marketing push behind it. Like when a new Nora Roberts book comes out, well, of course that gets some, distributor, buy-in and they, but that's to everybody's advantage. When a new Stephen King book comes out, it's the same as if whatever, like there's no one thing that indies don't do as well as New York is in that like group buying thing, like New York publishers, they've got co-op buying for advertising, and that's not something which is currently available to indies because we all publish individually through KDP, right? Which is not the portal. Like, people forget this, that KDP, our terms and conditions are totally different than the contracts that New York publishers, because they have such big buying power, have. Amazon is they're throwing up all sorts of roadblocks to indies kind of coordinating. They don't want to have new contracts with, so like, for example, Draft to Digital, which is an awesome aggregator, and will, they're constantly reaching out to new places. They can't list books on Amazon because Amazon doesn't want, 4,000 indies to be listed through Draft to Digital. Now, one way for indies to kind of slightly go around that and possibly get some advantage of having that New York publisher, I don't know, whatever, is to use Pronoun. Have we talked about Pronoun yet?
Yeah, we did talk about Pronoun. Yeah,
I can never remember what we talked about, because Pronoun is oh, that's right. In my conspiracy theory, we talked about this with X.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan necessarily, but they have a different terms of service than KDP does. And so if Macmillan can offer that, Pronoun, it is possible that down the road we'll have some sort of group, a distributor that, like, somehow, like, maybe a publisher, I don't know, like maybe Kensington. I mean, Macmillan is evil, but I don't know, Kensington might not be evil. And so, like, if Kensington or someone, like, if somehow we got access to, like, indies take over and, like, we buy Kensington, people at Kensington pay no attention. This is not a real plan. But like if we did some sort of, like, hostile, but it's a really good plan. If we did some sort of, like, hostile takeover of a New York publisher and then could use that existing contract to get better, co-op ad buys and stuff like that, that would be a big game changer. But I also think that the ebb and flow of sales, I think it's not great business to assume that your sales will always increase. That is not how markets work. That is not, like, basic economics. So when we see sales drop and everyone goes, the sky is falling, it is not my assumption that the sky is falling. It is my assumption that that is a normal market correction.
That, and also if you haven't published anything new in a while, that could also explain your lack of sales.
It might have so my sales dropped in January. In January? I'm confused now. You know how, like, you get paid 2 months in arrears and you're like, I don't know what month I'm talking about? February. So my sales dropped from January to February, and then from February to March. I had a release in January, I had a release in February. I did not have a release in March. But I noticed, but I was kind of distracted, but I didn't really notice, because I'm a terrible business person, actually. I didn't actually notice the sliding sales because I was busy writing books and releasing them. And then I was like, oh my God, my sales have actually dropped, like, a big chunk. And then I was like, hang on, Self, the sky is not falling. It's probably just a market, ebb and flow kind of thing. But there is that, like, we are not, like I said, we're not good business people. And so we jump to these, like, pretty significant conclusions when, and lots of other things happen in 2016. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think the data guy is wrong. But the problem with any of these theories is that we look at something, we have this observational data, and we start to try and make sense of it. And I think that actually often data is more like strangely curious than anything else, that there is no explanation. There was no one thing that caused it. There might be lots of little factors, but often they end up competing with each other rather than, having a cumulative causal effect. So that's my thought.
Interesting. Well, do you have anything else we want to comment on? I mean, it was interesting to see New Zealand lumped in there. I was
Yeah.
like, it's a big English market. Okay, I'm
So
sure
so
there
was
are other
Canada
countries.
not on the list?
Canada
What
is
were
on
the
the list. It basically
What?
goes America, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And they said that basically UK and America are very similar markets, but Canada and Australia were different because they have more of a Kobo presence and obviously an iBook presence because iBooks, iTunes, Macs are everywhere.
Yeah. My I know that like for myself, Australia always outstrips Canada. So I'm surprised to hear that Canada was ahead of Australia. I was
I
actually
think it was more in terms of the number of population. It's probably why it was put in that
oh,
order.
gotcha. Gotcha.
Not
But
because of that, yeah.
but yeah, like I mean, I love Kobo, and I know that I'm sometimes alone in that in the ebook world. But they are a solid third retailer for me most months, usually ahead of Nook now. Now, keep in mind, I'm not I'm not American. I don't write that many books set in the US. About half of my books are set in the US, and half of them are set in Canada and are written in Canadian English. Um, which you think that that would give me a serious advantage in Canada. It does not, but it does mean that I have a pretty solid fan base in Australia and the UK. People in the UK are like, they dig books set in Canada. So but actually, Americans, like, I very rarely have anybody complain about that. But anyway, so the Kobo people in general, they seem to like my Canadian set books, and so um over time, I have slowly grown that as a market. And aside from the Kobo Plus thing, they're good peeps. No bueno, no bueno with Kobo Plus. Yeah.
I want to lead on now to another survey. It just seems to be a month of numbers that's happened in the news. But a fellow New Zealand writer pointed this one out to me. But in October of last year, writer earning surveys were distributed to several professional writing organisations in New Zealand. And I said writing, not riding. If anyone's
Writing,
thinking,
writing.
said it wrong. So about 380 writers completed the whole survey, which you think is really not that much. But I mean, New Zealand is small. We've got 4.6 million people, but still only 380 writers. Most of them members of these professional organizations had responded to this. And the results were basically not many can make a living as a full-time writer. Now, the reason why this was brought to my attention was they also had, it was also covered in a small panel discussion on one of our national radio services. And what I want to say? And it was just interesting because information was revealed. And we also have a link to the full summary of the survey. That when they mean writers, they don't mean just fiction and non-fiction authors. They mean anyone who does any kind of writing for money. So that includes bloggers and um, yeah, anything to do with writing. So which made it very interesting, and it just the person who brought it to my attention was just a bit concerned about how this data was collated. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and basically, was it the FF? I can't even say that word.
The
The
efficacy.
validity of the
Yeah.
study, basically.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a problem with surveys, right? Like, it's not. We have this complaint in romance all the time. Every It seems like every year there's a survey distributed, and after it's distributed, then the results are shared, and there's a bias, right? There's a
Mhm,
bias of who wants to take the survey, right?
mhm,
Um, People who are working full time as writers, actually earning a living, see the survey. If the first two questions don't resonate with them, bam, they're out. They're not going to bother finishing it because their time
mhm.
is valuable. Um, people who are super grumpy about something are more likely to take a survey because they want to be heard, right? And then it's like, well, how is it distributed? If it's distributed through a professional organization, you're going to have more people who are within that professional organization take the survey. People who aren't in that professional organization aren't going to hear about it until after the survey is closed. There was one, I'm a member of RWA, Romance Writers of America, and they sent out a link that was a survey being done by a graduate student at a university. And the questionnaire was problematic. This was a couple of years ago. The questionnaire was problematic. And so lots of people, like they took the survey, but at the same time they had concerns about it. And none of those concerns were reflected when the survey data was released. And sure enough, the conclusions that were drawn were not actually representative of the people who were loudly raising their voices and saying, hey, I completed this and I am not represented, and it's every so often a romance author will take it upon themselves. They get a SurveyMonkey account and they start a survey and they distribute it. Well, I mean, the people that they know online, their friends or their readers or whatever, who complete the survey, that's not representative of the population at large. It's very hard to get a good slice of any actual representative slice of the population, which isn't to say that we shouldn't take those surveys, but we shouldn't make those surveys, but we need to do a better job of upfront saying what the limitations of them are, and naming that population as much as possible. I remember when I was in university, it was really important if you took a survey to try and capture the demographics of your survey population. And I rarely see that, if ever, attached to one of these, tell us about writers, The reality is, I'm a full-time writer. I earn a living as a writer. I'm surrounded by people that do. When I see survey after survey after survey that says, oh, no, that's very rare, I look around and I think it's not that rare. It's not easy, but it's not rare. That is not the word that I would use.
Yeah, and I think this survey in particular, you were saying that the professional full-time writer might look at the first couple of questions and then go, no, I don't have time for this. There were a lot of people that who did take the survey or started to take the survey that dropped out at around question 3. And I haven't been able to find out what question 3 was, but I assume it had something to do with income. Because that would probably be the point where I'd be like, you're not getting that information from me. And I'd be like, close the tab. But it was interesting that people dropped off. They did say that people dropped off at about question 3. But
that's actually even better reporting than what I often see. So I'm kind of impressed that they admitted that.
And they also said that about 23% of the respondents may have self-published something within the last 12 months. But I wasn't able to gain information as to what kind of income these possibly self-published authors were earning compared to those that hadn't been self-published. And I did try and follow it up with the CEO, but probably quite rightly, she did come back to me after I'd asked her some questions, and she said she'll try to help out, is that some of the information I was asking for, I might not be able to get because it depends on what kind of terms that were agreed upon with the people taking the survey as to how that information would be used, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But yes, I thought it was interesting that it wasn't really providing me information that I would like to know as a writer. It was only, because it was conducted by people who weren't writers. It was an actual company that specializes in surveys, and they said it was based on similar surveys that were generated overseas. So, but it seems to be that the news outlets in New Zealand have seized upon the authors in New Zealand don't earn much money angle. and I'm like, I don't really feel like it was properly representative. And people on Passive Voice did make comments about this, like, I didn't even know there was that survey. This is when all the New Zealand writers started to come out of the digital woodwork. What?
Yeah. Well, and that really speaks to how global, and sometimes American, let's be honest, how global the writing community has gotten. And and we have stepped away from our national organizations because our national organizations don't represent us. Like, I know here in Canada, the it's literary fiction or bust, canfic, we call it. And if you're not on that train, then you are nothing, unfortunately. There is no interest, none whatsoever, in not just self-publishing, but any kind of genre fiction. It's like, it's like we've sold out or something. So,
Well, at least you can sell in America, in Australia,
it's true.
in the UK, and apparently in New
It's
Zealand.
and there are Canadian readers, but like, even the Canadian readers, is why I said I was surprised, to hear people talking about Canada as its own marketplace, because Canadian readers almost exclusively buy their books on .com, the same. Even though, like, I know in New Zealand you have to. In Canada, we have an Amazon.ca store, and very few people keep their ebook libraries on it.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing with Australia. New Zealanders can opt to buy from the Australian store, but I chose not to because there's restrictions and it costs more because Australian government wants all books to cost a certain amount. But apart from that, but Australians will also opt for the .com one as well. So it's interesting because it's even Data Guy's information probably isn't as accurate, but it's more accurate than anything else out there. And I do remember that I think Hugh Howey and Data Guy got together to create the author earnings report in the first place because of, what was it, Publishers Weekly or
or
someone like that?
Bookscan, maybe.
I can't remember who it was, had done a big survey, and they came out with basically similar results as to what the New Zealand writers came out with, is authors aren't making money anymore. And Hugh Howey was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And Self-Publishing Roundtable basically eviscerated the representatives of that survey that came on. And and then author earnings popped up. So if someone can't do it right, you get Data Guy to get it as most accurate information as you can.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, should we talk about Samhain or Samhain? How do you say it?
Samhain is how they say it.
Okay.
I think. So this is a cautionary tale, and I should, preface it with saying that I am not a Samhain author. I don't have any insider information about it. But Samhain was a long-time ebook publisher that was, quite well regarded for a long time. They published romance and urban fantasy and paranormal and that sort of thing. And then last year, there was a possibility it was going to close. Lots of confusion, lots of turmoil over a couple of months. And then, they were fine. Actually, no worries. They started selling audiobook rights and they are back on the right track and everything's good. Well, lo and behold, this February, they closed, and they closed for good. But what has fallen out ever since then is that anybody who had complicated secondary rights sold by Samhain, like, for example, audiobooks, the rights reversion from that publisher back to the authors, now that those books are no longer being sold by that publisher, has proven quite complicated. And again, I don't know the ins and outs of what contracts were offered. I did hear through the grapevine that different contracts were offered. Authors were being basically, authors were being told they had to sign a contract to get their rights back. And in those contracts were some confusing terms about the outstanding royalties that were owed and what would happen to those secondary rights at the end of the contracted period. So, for example, in audiobooks, it might be sold for 7 years or 10 years. At the end of that 7 or 10 years, which started most of them about a year ago, what happens to that? What happens to that audiobook? Who then gets, so like most audiobooks, and they're egregious terms, most audiobooks are sold for a lump sum, like $2,000, for example, and no royalties to be paid out for X number of years. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 7. So if it's a 7-year term, you might not get any royalties for 5 years, and then you earn some royalties for the last 2 years. If it's a 10-year term, it might be like no royalties for 7 or 8 years, and then you get some royalties for the last. And then after that, you can either continue on that royalty structure or negotiate the rights, or the rights to the audio. I don't think you'd ever get the recording back, but then you get your rights back, so you could re-record. So, so if Samhain, who they own the audio rights, if they're now defunct, at the end of that 5-year contract, who gets those audio royalties, which would then be generated? But then where do they pass to? Do they pass to the author? So these rights got really complicated, and it's a cautionary tale that your intellectual property, the rights last forever. But if you get tangled up with the wrong business, if you get tangled up with the wrong publisher, and we saw this with Dorchester, and we saw this, with Samhain, Loris Cave, I don't think that they sold any audio rights, but like it could be anybody, right? It could be a big 5 publisher that collapses. And for some authors who had been getting regular, like nice royalty checks every month from Samhain, now all of a sudden, quite unexpectedly, they are looking at least 6 months before they get any royalties, because Samhain's saying they want to wait until they get absolutely everything in before they'll cut any more royalty checks, which is, that sets off alarm bells, right? Like that's concerning. But as an author, you don't have a whole lot of leverage material. This goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the podcast, right? How we don't have very much leverage power when it comes to Amazon or any individual publisher or anything like that. So, it's a cautionary tale to be careful about what rights when you sell a book to a publisher. If you sell a book and you choose not to self-publish, what rights do you sell? Do you retain your own audio rights? Do you retain secondary rights for, foreign markets or, whatever, film, television? Because if they get those rights, they can sell them again, sell them again. And then you have no control over what happens there, even after, the publisher that you had negotiated with, if they go bankrupt. So it's it's a bit of a mess. I'm hearing just this week, because I was really concerned last week for some friends that heard. This week I'm hearing more people getting their rights back. So it sounds like things are slowly getting sorted out. Agents are getting involved and contracts are being rewritten, which is good news. But it's concerning.
Yeah, because you hear in a lot of cases when something closes down, they will liquidate what they have. What happens then if they liquidate your audio right?
So, well, that's what happened with Dorchester, right? So actually, Amazon swept up a whole host of Dorchester titles. So there are people who have books with an Amazon imprint, and they're stuck. Like and Amazon isn't pushing those titles. They just put them in KU, and there they kind of languish. It's very upsetting. Yeah, if you're a writer, particularly if you're a writer who's only written a couple of books, and that they took you a long time, and you're not a fast producer, those are your babies, right? And someone's stolen them from you. It's awful.
Well, technically, they haven't stolen them from you because you kind of
sold them away. Well,
money.
Yeah, but I think that even if legally that's true, I think that when your rights are like secondary rights are then handed off to someone else, and like you think that you're getting your rights back because the business is closing, and then it turns out, oh no, you're not getting your rights back because of tiny little, the fine print, man. The fine print matters so much.
Yeah, I think didn't something similar like that happen to Alora's Cave? Some people were like, oh, Alora's Cave's closing. Awesome. I can start getting covers made for my ebooks, and
Mhm.
even I was a bit astounded that people went off and made covers and stuff. I'm like, you don't actually have a
Yeah.
piece of paper or an e-paper if you want to be
Yeah. Get your
digitally
rights
correct.
reversion in place first. Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. Do we want to talk about anything else or
Nothing that
no?
I can nothing that I can think of. I mean, it's what are we ramping up to in this spring? I mean, conference season is starting soon.
For
That can
you,
be quite
maybe.
for me, maybe, that can be quite distracting for authors. All of a sudden, you're trying to like go to maybe one a month or even one just every couple months, and there's the ramp up to it, and then there's like the inevitable con crud that you get after a conference, and all of a sudden going on a weekend jaunt to see your writer buds and get like reinvigorated leads to like a 3-week downtime from writing. So if you are a newbie, if anyone's listening and they're a newbie author and they're thinking about doing a couple conferences this summer, keep in mind just how much they really do suck out of your schedule. That's my little looking ahead
Because
note.
even if you don't get the con crud, you still gotta,
The
sleep off some of the exhaustion you've accrued there.
yeah, exactly. And also like your mind is spinning, right? Like you go and you get all sorts of awesome ideas. Sometimes that's overwhelming and you go to make a to-do list and you have like freakouts. That's legit too. And sometimes it's just like the actual physical toll of traveling there and back, and then needing to sleep, and yeah.
See, I don't go to writers' cons or anything like this. New Zealand's a bit small. They do have these things that you can go to, but nothing's really interested me. Or if I,
Yet nothing has interested you yet.
or yeah. Well, I have been looking, and my husband has said, I don't mind if we have to put money into you going to a conference or something like that. But if I was going to go to a conference to sell my books, that's going to be one hell of a logistical nightmare. And
Yeah.
really, the only big, big con in New Zealand is Armageddon, and there is no way in hell I can afford a stall there.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it's
don't
just not cost effective in New Zealand.
yeah. I don't
Ebooks.
I don't go to cons to sell books, mostly because when you go to the States, that's like a dodgy proposition. I like to go for craft development. So I like to go to cons that are writer, like not fan events.
Mhm.
Although there is one in Canada, Romancing the Capital, which I love and go to every year, and I'm super excited about for this year. But in general, I like to go to writers' conferences rather than reader
Mhm.
events.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are a few, and from what I've seen, they're about $400,
Right. Yeah.
$500 to get into, and then on top of that, you've got your accommodation. The
Hotel and food
Yeah.
and yeah.
I mean, I've seen one in Rotorua, in August that looked interesting, but they mostly tend to happen in the main capitals, not so much near where I am. So it's a bit more expensive for me to get to, and I think I can get more out of, talking on a podcast with other authors, and learning
I
all
think
their magic beans.
I think you need to organize your own conference, like conference at the end of the world, for example. You could call
At
it
the end of the
that.
world, yeah. It'll have to be online though, because that's
I'm showing
cheaper.
up. I'm showing up on your doorstep, and I'll be
Oh,
like,
yes.
"It's a conference."
We'll play D&D because that's my new thing at the moment.
Amazing.
Oh, well, we should probably wrap this up, otherwise we'll go on
Okay.
forever. It's fucking hot where I am right now, so,
Yeah, no, it's nice and cool here still.
It was cold the other day. Yeah, New Zealand weather in March is going really weird. But,
Mm,
anyway, so where can people find you on the internet, Zoe, if they don't know yet already?
yeah. ZoeYork.com,
Mhm.
AinsleyBooth.com, and for a little bit, if you liked what I said earlier about writing Canadian books, FriskyBeavers.com, because I co-write this series with Sadie, and we have a new book coming out next week, April 4th, called Full Mountie. and you do not want to miss that. So it's super Canadian and super hot.
Well, from Mountie by the sounds of things. Very Canadian.
Indeed. Very.
Okay, and you can find me and more information about this podcast and information about the Xavier on PWSpodcast.com. That sounds right. I think that's right. Not well, we're fucked. And also a reminder of the Marmite Challenge. If you're watching the video, you might see it sitting in the background behind me there. I have to finish the first draft of my cozy mystery by the time we do our Exeter and I do our update journey episode, which is next week. Will I eat a Marmite sandwich or won't I? I think I might have to. So if you want to see me puke.
Wait, so do you guys have Marmite and not Vegemite? Is Vegemite exclusively only in Australia? Oh, you've got both. Okay.
We have Marmite, we have Vegemite, we have Promite, we have, all the yucky mites,
Promite. Where does that lie in the Marmite to Vegemite
I don't
scale?
know. I don't eat these things. Although I probably will be eating one of them next week. My sister informed me that Vegemite is better, and I was like, I don't care. They both are yucky.
I'm a Vegemite fan, but I've never had Marmite, so.
Oh, well, I'll mail you what's left then. Okay,
sounds like a plan.
And that is it from us. Since Six isn't here, I shall say it. Good night, Internet.